All right, and welcome to our first episode of Just the News from Around the World. This is our weekly wrap. It's Friday, which means that we're closing the week. And we're just going to give you a quick wrap of everything that's happened across the world. For me personally, this is me with a hat tip to World This Week, where Dr. Prannoy Roy, back in the 80s, when some of you were not born, taught us how the news ought to be done. So this is our version of the world this week. I'm Faye D'Souza. This is my colleague Amita. You've seen her many, many times. If you like this format, leave us a note. And of course, like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It will help us bring you the news more and do more of this work because it pays the bills. All right, Amita, it has been an interesting week around the world, but not any more interesting than Kanye West or Ye.
And the latest is that his account has been suspended on Twitter yet
again. So he was suspended. Elon Musk brought him back, and then he's been suspended again. And Musk actually said that, I'm sorry, but I tried my best, but this guy just simply can't be helped. What is it he did exactly?
So he posted a series of erratic tweets, one of which appeared to show a symbol combining a swastika and a Jewish star. And this is, of course, after the interview with conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, where he says that he likes Hitler. And, of course, Elon Musk has tweeted saying that he tried his best, but he couldn't help.
You know, the thing about Kanye West is this is not, obviously, there's a series of offenses here, anti-Semitic offenses particularly. He actually showed up to Paris Fashion Week wearing a t-shirt that said White Lives Matter. That started off an entire conversation, and a lot of people were very upset by that t-shirt. And then he went on to say several anti-Semitic things. At that point, by the way, Kanye West was at the peak of his net worth, and he actually felt that nobody could do anything. He could say or do whatever he wanted. And several brands proved that to be otherwise. So to begin with, you'll remember Adidas dropped him. It was a tough decision for Adidas at that point because they were looking, by dropping him, they forfeited or went through a loss of about £250 million in that one quarter. And, West, or Ye as he's currently called, didn't believe that they could actually do it. And when they did, his net worth dropped from what was 1.9 billion down to 400 million because that was a massive, massive contract. And after that, we saw Balenciaga, we saw Gap, Madame Tussauds at London took out his wax figure and said, we don't want him anymore. And there were several others who did that. But the conversation that has sort of popped up now, which is sort of a podcasty interview with Alex Jones, who's a certain type of conversation also that they have, where they were actually discussing Hitler.
Yes.
And Alex Jones talked about how he really liked the jackets that the German army was wearing. And Ye basically said, to quote AFP, he said, I see good things. He invented highways. He invented the microphone I'm using as a musician. You can't say he never did anything good. Factually, there's several holes to be poked to that, but that is not the problem. The anti-Semitic content is that problem. And it does seem like this time there might be no rolling this back, even for Elon Musk. And
yes,
Twitter.
and in fact, joining that, the list of brands that have dropped him is also Parler, which has now said that West is not going to buy the firm any longer. They put out a statement which says the company, and I'm quoting the statement, the company has mutually agreed with Ye to terminate the intent of sale.
Parler is it's a media company. It's a very it's very popular among the right wing in America. So even Parler turned around and Ye was scheduled to buy them out, but they cancelled that conversation and that negotiation, and that fell through as well. So that's the big thing that's happened to begin with. But looking at the more serious side of what's happening in the world this week, President Joe Biden and his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, have had a conversation about Russia. Biden has actually said that he doesn't mind having a conversation. He's ready to speak to Putin if that will find a way to end the war.
Yes, and Russia has, of course, put out a statement. They've said that they are open to talks on a possible settlement in Ukraine, but they've said that the refusal of the US to recognize the annexed territories as Russian is hindering this compromise, a potential compromise.
Yeah, and we reported this earlier this week as well. The death toll in Ukraine, where the numbers are now coming up, a senior Ukrainian official said it's between 10,000 and 13,000 of its soldiers have been killed since the beginning of this Russian invasion that started in February this year. There is no number as of now of the number of civilian lives that have been lost, but we understand they're being called significant.
Yeah, the BBC had put out a figure in June, but the BBC reports that number is much higher.
Could be a lot higher now than it was in June when it was last, when it was last reported. That ping was on my laptop, so I apologize for that. Well, we know that Russia has responded, as Amita just told us, but they are, of course, willing to talk about a possible settlement in Ukraine, but they're not willing to talk about the rest of it. Russian airstrikes this week have left millions of Ukrainians without electricity and running water. Remember, it's freezing. Below freezing temperatures in most of those cities, so it becomes more than a human rights issue there to have people live without electricity and water in these, under these conditions. Moving from Russia to China, Amita.
So protests have sort of died down in China, but the crackdown has now begun. There are reports of arrests.
Crackdown on protesters.
On protesters. There are reports of arrests being made, and there is this one report which the Guardian has put out, which says that Chinese authorities have initiated the highest emergency response level of censorship, which means that their phones are being tracked, people are being called in for checks at the police stations, and a crackdown on VPNs as well.
So this is interesting because remember, this was the protest in which people were holding up blank sheets of paper. And one of the reasons why they were holding up blank sheets of paper was, can the government hold it against me if I'm holding up a placard that says nothing? Apparently they can.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we saw happen was the restrictions were eased, which meant that the Chinese government responded to protest from their citizens, completely unheard of. But now we're seeing that that there is a crackdown that has begun on the people who are protesting. It will be interesting to see if this would continue to happen, in the sense that will there be more protests? Will the Chinese citizens who haven't really voiced an opinion on anything since the late 1980s, since 1989, will they now come out of their homes more often and make their voices heard more often, make their what they call discontentment with the government heard more often? But this could be the beginning of something. Crackdown or no, it could be the beginning of something in China. Moving on to our next story. We know, just take a look a little bit at the World Cup. I know there are a lot of people who are bummed out that Germany and Belgium got knocked out. Messi has scored a few goals, some penalties, and is doing well. But the story that we're looking at is Iran. Now remember, the Iranian team refused to sing their national anthem during the beginning of their first match. But a lot of people were celebrating that knockout in Iran.
In Iran, in fact, people were celebrating this because they look at this as a blow to the current regime, and we saw that saw the protests in the stadiums as well. In fact, we also saw players not sing the national anthem, and that sort of became very symbolic.
Again, human rights groups have said 488 people have been killed, 60 of which were children, since these protests began after the death of Masa, a 22-year-old Iranian woman who died mid-September after being detained by the country's morality police, who felt that her headscarf wasn't in place, or wasn't exactly as per what is determined. Speaking of women who changed the world, prime ministers, both of them, Jacinda Ardern and Sanna Marin, had to answer sexist questions at a press conference. So it doesn't matter if you rise to the very top post of your entire country. If you're a woman, people are going to ask you some dumb stuff at your press conference. So here were a pair of prime ministers who had a trade delegation and a whole day of meetings. And at the end of it, one not so bright male journalist asked them, and I quote, "A lot of people are wondering if the two of you are meeting just because you're a similar age and you have a lot of stuff common. I mean, this is a suggestion really that women are sitting around and discussing their clothes, their makeup, their nail paint, whatever it is. But the responses were really good, right?
Yeah. In fact, New Zealand's Prime Minister said, what about the fact that when Barack Obama and John Key met, were they asked about their age at all? And of course, Sanna Marin said that we're meeting because we're prime ministers.
I know, I love that answer. Because we're prime ministers, that's why we're meeting. But to give you the real answer to the question that should have been asked, Marin is on her visit to New Zealand, which is her first official tour as the Finnish Prime Minister. During the bilateral meeting, they're discussing, of course, the global economic slowdown, the cost of living, the considerable amount of trade that takes place between these two countries. Ardern has said that they share a strong commitment to support Ukraine following the Russian invasion and rules based on international order that their countries rely on under pressure because of that conflict. So a couple of quick things before we wrap up. There is a new film on Netflix that's creating some buzz.
Yes, that's called Farha. Now, Israel is not too happy with the film. They wanted it not to be aired on Netflix at all because they say that it is creating a false narrative. It's on this one Palestinian family that was murdered in the 1948 war.
Right, and it tells the story of a 14-year-old girl as her village comes under attack by the Israeli forces. Netflix, in this particular case, has stuck to its decision to carry the film, and it has now become available to view. So a lot of people are talking about that. So if you're wondering what that was about, that's what it is. Another quick tidbit, monkeypox, you remember, with the pox on the hands and the face, is now being called Mpox. The World Health Organization has decided to rename that virus because of stigmatization of the condition. So it's now being called Mpox. And, you know, the reason why it was called monkeypox to begin with, it was named because the scientist who found that particular virus was using monkeys in his lab to actually detect it. That's what it was called, monkeypox. But in the recent outbreak that we saw in the world, because it was largely seen in Africa, there were some on social media cases of typecasting, racism, things that were said that were really, really uncool, which is why the WHO has decided to step in and rename the virus itself. It will no longer be called monkeypox. It will be called Mpox.
Yes, in fact, after that, they did see, of course, that there were many cases outside
of Africa as well. Yes.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of Just the News from around the world. Signing off for Amrita and me for the week. A couple of things to request from you. If you like this format, let us know with a thumbs up. If there's any feedback you have or there's something you want us to look at, if you want us to maybe from next week also do a business bulletin where we look at what's happening in the world of business and give you a quick rundown of everything that was reported there, we can do that for you as well. So any other suggestions, we're open to hearing from you. Please look out for this bulletin on a weekly basis. We're trying to put in as much effort to give you as much quality as possible. Thank you so much for watching. Mamta.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.